Welcome, everybody. You have just joined the Father Show, and I'm your host, Mike Thompson. And we've got a fantastic show for you today. This is going to be something that you do not want to miss. And a lot of men, it'll be very advantageous for you to watch this. You know, in today's society, we have a lot of men, traditional way of going through life is changed. The wife is working more than the husband. The husband stays home and watch the kids, raise the kids, because the wife makes more and it's cheaper for her to continue to work than the husband stay home because of childcare. So today we have Katherine Miller, and she's from the Miller Law Group, and that group has been around for over 20 years, and she's going to be talking about collaborative divorce. And we're going to be discussing that. You might not even know what it is, but by the end of the show, you will. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Katherine Miller.
Thanks, Mike. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm really happy to be here talking to fathers and any mothers who are happening to tune in about collaborative and a change in the traditional family structure.
Yeah, because I've noticed, and I've talked to a lot of men, that the traditional role of a father and men has just really changed, even from when I was growing up. More younger men in their 20s and 30s are staying home with the kids, and as a wife goes out and brings home, as we used to say, the bacon. So it's really good to see. We know there's fathers need to be more involved in the kids' life. That's one thing we've kind of learned over the years, just how important a father is to the kids. But when you start getting ready to go through a divorce and your wife is the breadwinner and she's making more money, uh, that can be a different situation altogether when you're going to court. But I want to find out first, before we dive into that, what is a collaborative uh, divorce?
Well, collaborative divorce is a kind of an amalgam of the support that people get when they hire attorneys or professionals to get them through the divorce process, and a kind of mediation process where the people, with the help of a neutral facilitator, can resolve the issues that they need to resolve on their own terms. Really, the way that I like to think of it is it gives you the support of the traditional litigation system with the flexibility and creativity and privacy of a mediation or just a straight up negotiation. So
Mm-hmm.
in the collaborative process, the attorneys are disqualified from participating in any future litigation between the parties should it happen. And at the beginning of the process, we sign what's called a participation agreement, which is essentially a contract that limits the role of the attorneys to the negotiation. And what that does is it means that all the participants in the negotiation are 100% invested in resolving the divorce matter out of court. There's nobody,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to withhold some information because when I file my motion next week, or hey, as a professional, I could make more money if this was litigated. No, that's
Right.
totally off the table. And the attorneys are there totally to support the parties to reach a non litigated out of court resolution. And in
And
addition, collaborative is an interdisciplinary process in which we work with financial neutrals and mental health professionals when necessary to deal with those aspects of the divorce that are really more emotional or about parenting or about the money. And the idea of that, Mike, is that divorce really is a people problem with legal ramifications, not a legal problem. And
mm-hmm.
so, to the extent that people can work with professionals who have more experience and more training to get through the non legal elements of the divorce, that they can work with those people probably for less money than they could work with the attorneys.
And I think it's very important when you say the attorneys come together and they're going to make sure that this doesn't go into litigation, because that's where their, in a sense, their buck stop right there.
That's
And
exactly right. They have
yeah,
no incentive to go to
yeah.
court, because if they do, they're fired and a new set of attorneys has to come in.
And that's important because I know in a lot of divorces that you know, watched and even gone through myself, that the attorneys will kind of keep things going, keep you and your ex bickering at each other instead of working out your differences so that you can come together and get this done. They will just keep the fire burning so that they can make more money. Because I've told many of men before, and women for that matter, why are you fighting over that lamp? You know, you're sitting there fighting over a lamp and it's costing you $5,000 an hour to fight over a lamp that you can go out and buy for another 25, $50. So, you know, don't do that. But people do. And the attorneys used to eat that up. So I was so happy to hear about a collaborative divorce, and I really want our men out there to know about it and to know that this is an option, a viable option for them should they have to go through a divorce, which I hope you don't.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about, that $5,000 fight over a $25 lamp really is obviously not about the lamp, right?
Right.
You know, and it comes into sort of two parts there. One is that, you know, I think there are attorneys out there who will try to, you know, churn the case and get more money at it just for that purpose. But I think most of us really are trying to do the right thing and help our clients figure this out. And when someone says, you know, Catherine, that lamp is super important to me, a lot of lawyers are just going to be like, all right, let's argue about the lamp, because that's what my marching orders are. We're going to argue about the lamp, instead of saying, hey, you know what, Mike, you could pay me $2,500 and pay your wife's attorney $2,500 to argue over the lamp. What's so important about the lamp? Well, it's just not fair. I had that lamp before we were married, or I went out and bought that lamp and she knew that lamp was special to me. And, you know, that's an emotional issue. And that's exactly what I'm saying. That's not a legal issue. That is, why is that lamp so important? And why are you so willing to fight about it? What's really going on?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's interesting. Einstein said something, and I'm butchering this, but it's something like, you can never solve a problem at the level at which it presents. And so, right here,
Mm-hmm.
if you're fighting about a lamp, like, that's obviously not really the problem. Like, what is going on underneath that? And that's likely an emotional issue.
Mm-hmm. And now, with a collaborative divorce, now when I went through a divorce myself, we actually did mediation because it was an amicable divorce. And we just sat down at a table with a mediator. And we, before we even went in, we had already decided this was going to be that, this is going to be this, you're going to have that, I'm going to have this. That's it. And it was so easy that, you know, I recommend it to everybody. But I have seen divorces that, you know, they go to court and there's, you know, the judge is saying this is the way it's going to be. And even though, you know, they say, well, we're going to look out for the best interest of the child, they don't. And even the parents don't. But and I don't know, maybe it's the environment that you're in, because you're in the courtroom and you got to feel like you got to win, instead of, I think at a collaborative, you're sitting at a table, you know, maybe probably across from each other, and you're talking about what's important to you and what's important to the kids, and you try to keep and hopefully you're still keeping the kids as your focus point. So what is the difference between a collaborative divorce and a mediator? I think I gave my opinion of it, but what is your opinion of the difference between the two?
Well, let's just stop for 1 second and congratulate you, Mike, on being able to do that with your ex-wife, because that's
Mhm.
really hard to do. And I don't want your listeners to think, you know what, there's something wrong with me if I can't do what Mike did, because that takes a lot of work and a lot of discipline, and most people cannot do it the way you did it. So most
Mm-hmm.
people need a little bit more support than what you're saying, and that doesn't make them
Right.
bad people or
No.
somehow deficient. I just want to
No.
be really clear about that. And I want to congratulate you on being able to do that. I was not able to do that when I got divorced, and this is what I do for a living. So I just
Mm-hmm.
want to be clear that that's not the rule. That's the
No.
exception.
And it is the exception. It's not the norm. I agree.
Because it's really hard to do. There's because of the emotions that come up.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine though that for people who were thinking, well, mediation, it could work for me, but I can't work it out at the kitchen table and then come in and tell the mediator all that stuff. So usually what happens in mediation is that the people go into the mediator's office and have those difficult conversations with the mediator, helping them and facilitating. Because what happens is that, and this will probably sound familiar to everybody, people get stuck in what I like to call the conflict trap. And the conflict trap, goes like this. I have a couple of conflict conversations with my husband where he says something, I say something, he says something, and then I know that the thing that I want to say, it's at the front of my mind, on the tip of my tongue, and I want to say it because I am right. I feel myself so right. But I also know that if I say the thing that I want to say, that I've said dozens of times before, I know that I could literally script out how the next 20 minutes is going to go, exactly what he's going to say, exactly what I'm going to say. And I also know that at the end of that conversation, both of us will walk away frustrated and unhappy. And when people are facing a divorce, they are really stuck in that conflict trap on a lot of different issues. It might be that it's happening many times a day and they're walking away frustrated and unhappy. So what happens? And so usually when I tell people that, people are like, yeah, I totally know what that feels like. Even if it's about emptying the dishwasher or putting the cap back on the toothpaste tube. It doesn't have to be big things. It can be little things where each person feels themselves really right. And it's really hard to let go of being right in that moment. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the mediator's job to intervene in that conflict trap and allow the parties to land in a place in important conversations that's different than frustrated, unhappy. And I'm not saying that it's easy, it's hard. I just want to say that mediation could be really a valuable tool for people who are not quite as ready to go in and say, well, we've decided she's getting the living room set and I'm getting the bedroom set and we're going to divide our assets 50-50 and this is what we're doing on parenting. I just want
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Okay.
So, and what's interesting is that in mediation, usually, and this is different, maybe in different parts of the country, but usually the people like yourself, Mike, go to mediation themselves. And so it's a three-way meeting, right? The mediator
Mm-hmm.
and the two spouses. I
Mm-hmm.
used to say husband and wife, but more and more we're having spouses of the same gender. And it
Right.
doesn't matter.
Right. Right.
And the attorneys, if there are attorneys involved, and it's always a good idea to have an attorney help you through this kind of situation. It's probably the biggest deal that you will negotiate in your entire life, like this divorce.
Yeah.
So the attorneys are there to give legal advice to the people, but they don't usually come into the room. That isn't to say they never do, but that they, as a general rule, you're sitting there by yourself, negotiating for yourself, and the attorney is there to answer questions, give you legal advice, and help you draft in the drafting process.
Mm-hmm.
And so collaborative brings those attorneys into the room with the same idea that you're going to have those conversations, identify the issues that need to be resolved, gather the important information that you need in order to resolve those decisions. And Mike, that information is both external information, like what's in the bank, what's your house worth, where are your kids in school, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also internal information. What's important to you? What's important to me? And how are we going to be able to articulate that so that we know what criteria each person is using in order to evaluate the options that we have? This is
Okay.
good because it meets my needs, or it's bad because it doesn't. So we're really trying to make that explicit in the room so everybody can hear it. And the reason the collaborative can work for some people where mediation doesn't is for many people feel that their spouse has more access to the financial information, their spouse is more adept in negotiation, or they just don't feel that there's a level playing field. Or sometimes people are afraid that they just don't know what they don't know, and they want to have a friend there with them. They want to have an ally with them, an advocate, someone who can make sure they don't make a mistake. And in that situation, collaborative can be better than mediation because the idea is the same. We're going to work this out based on what's important to the people without relying on the third person to make the decisions for us, but we're going to do it with the support of our lawyers and other professionals as desired in order to reach a resolution that really does work for the kids. And you said one other thing, shut me up if I'm just going on too much, but that's about the children. And I think my experience as a litigator was even when everybody says and really means that they want to protect the children in a litigation, it's impossible not to use the children in some way as a tool or a manipulation. And in collaborative and in mediation, we really have the opportunity to protect the children, put their interests first, and do what works for them before we think about ourselves.
Yeah, because that's really important. Uh, Kids, for some reason, and I want to explore this one day a little bit more, but kids just take on that burden on their own. They just automatically think that the divorce is their fault, that they have something to do with it. If they were better, then mommy and daddy would stay together. And, I've seen and talked with a lot of divorced parents and kids, and I don't think I met, even when the parents fought a lot, I don't think I met a kid yet that didn't still want their parents back together again. They still wanted them. So we, I, you know, we have to figure out a way to make this as easy on them as possible. And as you mentioned, not to use them as prongs so that, you can get your way or you can hurt the other party. Uh, bec- because your divorce is coming for a reason. Whatever the reason may be, you have to still think about you got kids that are depending on you. And as I tell parents, they're looking at you, they're learning from you, they're learning how to act because of how you act. So, and it's going to affect them down the road. So we have to. Now, we were talking about, fathers of staying at home more, and then you have the mother going out. With a collaborative divorce, how does that work for men that are stay at home fathers and the wife is going to work? How do you think that works for them? How have you experienced it?
Well, let me just back up and say that that can be a very tricky dynamic. And I think it's um, uh, having something to do with this particular moment in time in the generation. So we're not really talking about fathers in their 20s so much in this really tricky dynamic, but it's more about couples who are in their 40s and 50s, which is a
Mm-hmm.
very common age to choose divorce,
Okay.
where the couple might have grown up in an era expecting a sort of um, I don't know, more traditional setting
Mm-hmm.
where the husband was going to be the primary breadwinner and the wife would be the primary caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, we're educated side by side and we go into our careers side by side, there has been a sense that it is the husband's job to bring in the bacon, to use the phrase you used earlier, right?
Right.
And the wife's job primarily to raise the children. And when that turns around, it could be fine. It could be great as long as the couple is working well together. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying it's going to be seamless. Every marriage is work, every relationship takes effort and takes discussion
Mm-hmm.
and compromise.
Yeah.
But when there's resentment about that, right? So when there's resentment about that, what ends up happening is the woman who's been the breadwinner is much more reluctant to share the assets of the marriage than a
Mm-hmm.
husband would be when the roles were reversed. And so you get a level of resentment and probably a conflict dynamic that has been going along with her nagging him. And I'm putting air quotes around that on purpose because she doesn't think she's nagging. She thinks she's just asking him to do something, because
Mm-hmm.
her perception in that dynamic is that she's doing everything. I'm making the doctor's appointments. I'm making the play dates. I'm arranging soccer practice. I'm doing, everything. And I'm also making the money. What are you doing? You're not doing anything. So maybe for years she's been trying to get him to get a new job or make more money or take the garbage out more or do the play dates or something like that because she feels really overwhelmed. And ultimately, this level of resentment uh, leads to divorce. Now, from his perspective, he's been taking care of the kids, and he's been doing everything. And it's not like he's been sitting on the couch playing video games, which she might think he's been doing. And so what you have is a resentment and a real sort of two-dimensional view of the situation by both parties, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I call it a classic controller stonewaller dynamic. So she's been trying to get him to do something, right? He perceives her as a controller, and he just like sometimes just shuts down and just is like, you know what? The only way to deal with this is to not interact. So she perceives that as stonewalling, and they get into like locked in. And so, what the advantage of working in the collaborative model is to understand that model, understand what's been happening so they can work, they have the opportunity because it's not a legal discussion entirely. They can understand a little bit of the dynamic about what's happening there, and
Mm-hmm.
they can then, because they have a chance to process that a little, they're not operating from that controller stonewaller dynamic. When they go into the negotiation, they can open it up and see the problem in a slightly different way, which allows them to show up best for the parents and also allows for what might be a fairer deal. And again, I'm going to put that in air quotes because fair is the F word. Everybody wants what's fair, they just can't agree on what that is.
Right.
But where because sometimes men in that situation don't want to get alimony. They're like, that's not a manly thing, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe they really need to.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there are things that they feel shamed about that they really shouldn't feel shamed about because they're those things like alimony are in the law in order to protect all parties, all members of the family, and to make sure that everybody's okay going forward. And so I think that in the collaborative process, given the opportunity to think that stuff through and not just fight the fight about the lamp, we really have a chance to make sure everybody's okay going forward. And that's really the most important thing.
Yeah. And let me ask you, because, you know, when the roles are reversed, when the husband is generally making more of the money, you hear a lot about, especially if he's successful, you hear a lot of women say that I want to live in a lifestyle that I've grown accustomed to. Do you hear that when the roles are reversed and the wife is making majority of the money and the husband is staying home?
I mean, do you hear that from the husband when
Yeah,
he's
do
in
we
the
hear it from the
role of
husband?
being the supportive?
Yeah.
Not as much,
Okay.
really not as much. And again, I think this is goes back to these sort of Disney-esque ideas as to who's supposed to do what. And
Mm-hmm.
so, there might be a level of, and I use this word cautiously, but entitlement on the part of a wife who's been primarily a homemaker, especially when the husband decides he no longer wants to be married, because there's a real dynamic there between the person who's choosing to leave. What sacrifices, if I'm choosing to end my marriage, what sacrifices am I willing to make in order to be free, right?
Yeah.
Versus the person who feels that this is being done to them. This was your choice, not my choice. Why should my life change?
Mm-hmm.
But in my experience, and I don't want to say this is a universal truth, but that men have less of an entitlement to what we call the marital lifestyle.
Yeah. Because I know I was a single dad when I got after getting divorced, and I stayed single for like 11 years. Now, when we had our divorce, part of the reason, it was one of the main reasons I'm not going to go into, but the one of the things that she used to say, well, I make more money than you. Well, that was like $500 a year that she made more than me, you know. But when we left, I said, hey, you can have the house. You take that car, I take this car, and we'll have our son 50 other time each, and that's it. Because I look at it like I think a lot of fathers, and what you just kind of alluded to, we feel like, hey, I can go out and get this stuff. I don't need for you to provide it for me. I might have stayed home, which I didn't. I did work. But I might have stayed home or even made less than you, but I don't need for you to take care of me. I don't need for you to put me back in a lifestyle that I'm accustomed to. I can do that on my own. Is that what you see a lot in that instance?
Yes, but it's not necessarily a good thing, because I think there's two things here. One is, nobody should be if at all possible, should feel like they're dependent on their ex-spouse, man or woman. I mean, to the extent we can set this up so that people have the ability to support themselves, that gives them much more power and much more feeling of empowerment and control of their own lives. And I think that's a great thing. And so we're looking to do that eventually, but there's a transition piece there. And so, Mike, you were not a stay-at-home dad, and so you didn't have to go out and find a career. And this
Right,
is true for men
right,
and women. I just want to be really clear that it's
right.
about getting from where we are as married people to where we're going to be as divorced people. And the hard part is that piece in between. How is that going to happen? Because those first few years, maybe while somebody's getting more education in order to be able to go back to work, or looking for a job, or you
Mm-hmm.
know what the money just is not there. Those are the toughest years, and the ones that really require careful consideration to come up with a plan that really can work to make the transition, so that both parties and the kids are set up for success for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. So how can a divorcing men feel more empowered given a situation where he is the make when you have a discretionary earning situation? How can he feel more empowered as he goes into this divorce uh, time of his life?
Well, I think that one great way to do that is to get help, and get some kind of divorce coaching or something like that. And there are a lot of people who have free resources on the internet, so you could just do some googling about that. Because I think that sometimes, and this is true again, men or women, but maybe particularly for men, that a sense of self-esteem has been diminished. And I think that it's
Mm-hmm.
really important for people to know their own value. And I don't mean like in an angry way, like you never appreciated me. It's not about the other person appreciating you. It's about you appreciating yourself and what you've
Absolutely.
brought in,
Yeah.
right? And how you bring value to your children's life, and how you bring value to yourself. And then I also think about, and I think this is true for all people, but think about what you want. If you could write your own ticket, a year from now, 5 years from now, what would your life look like? What would you be doing for work? What would your relationship with your kids be? Where will you be living? What will it look like? And because if you had some kind of vision of what you want, it's a lot easier to plan a way to get there. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot easier for your lawyer to help you. And it's a lot easier for you to help yourself if you know what road to take. If you're just standing at an intersection, you're like, you know what, I'm just going to take a random road because any place is better than here. You're not going to, it's less likely that you're going to end up in the place you want to go. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think really getting clarity about um, who you are, what's really important to you, and really get help doing this. Because, I mean, you could do it with journaling or meditation, but our brains work differently when we talk it out. And even if
Mm-hmm.
it's a friend, although I warn you, friends are going to get bored of this conversation after a while.
They're only gonna take so much.
Absolutely.
Well, That's some great information. And Catherine, I want to thank you for being on the show today. But before we go, um, how can people get in touch with you? And I know you have a book out as well, right?
I do. Well, I also have a podcast called Divorce Dialogues where I interview a lot of experts on divorce. There are many, many episodes posted there, and it's a great resource for people, free, great resource for people who are looking for expertise in all kinds of divorce related subjects, ranging from deciding to divorce, choosing a lawyer, choosing a process, to dating after divorce, and so on. So they can find that at www.divorcedialogues.com. I've written the New Yorker's Guide to Collaborative Divorce, which is really pretty relevant to anybody considering the collaborative process, just the New Yorkers, because that's where I happen to be. But really, that's available on Amazon. And if anybody wants more information about me or what we do, you can find it at www.westchesterfamilylaw.com.
And thank you so much. And I know we also have your information on our website. So don't go anywhere. We're going to talk in a few minutes, but I'm going to close this out. But, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be our show for today. And uh, we want to say thank Katherine Miller for coming on the show and being a part of it. You can find more information about Katherine on our website. Just go to the Father Show with MikeThompson.com and click on resources, and you can click on the state. Now she's in New York, so click on New York and you can find her information there on our website. And please don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the show, don't forget to tell somebody else and even share it. And I want you also to leave comments on the bottom to let us know what you thought about the show. If you have additional comments, if you would like for us to do this show again, so you can get more information, feel free to let us know so that we can get you all set up and ready for your next phase in your life. So thank you for joining us this week. We really appreciate it. And we'll love to see you next week. God bless.